Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, How to Podcast, a Workshop for Businesses. It's great to see you all today, and I hope you are all well. My name is Gemma, and I am from the XpoNorth digital team. XpoNorth Digital is Highlands and Islands Enterprises mechanism for specialist digital support for the creative and heritage economies across the Highland Council region, and the project is delivered by Ironworks Venue. This workshop is part of HIE's Northern Innovation Hub, which is designed to build on and accelerate business innovation. It is funded through the Inverness and Highland City Region deal, which is a joint initiative supported by £315 million of investment from the UK and Scottish governments, Highland Council, HIE and UHI. I am now going to pass over to Alex Smith, who is our project lead from the XpoNorth digital team.
Thanks, Gemma. Very well done. Brilliant. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us. We appreciate you giving up your time and giving us your attention. And we hope you find it really valuable, and delighted to be joined by Pauline Moore, who's going to cover the subject in expert detail, hugely experienced. So very pleased that she's joined us. And I'm going to hand over to Pauline in a minute to introduce herself. However, I'm just going to give a quick kind of breakdown in format and some kind of housekeeping, if that's okay. But so we're going to hopefully make this session as interactive as we can. There's a couple of ways we can do that. If you have any questions, if you pop them in the chat as we're going through the session, I can either field them to Pauline directly, or what would be even better, given that we're quite a small, intimate group, is if anyone feels comfortable enough to come on camera or not, or put the question to Pauline, would be great. We'd love for you to get as much as you can out of Pauline being here. And if you're comfortable to engage with us that way, that would be fantastic. Alternatively, please do put your questions in the chat, and I'll make sure that we put them to Pauline. As a guide, we're going to try and go through, cover quite a lot of ground. We've got an hour, but it's quite a tight hour. So we're going to try and deal with a few key themes around podcasting. The creative process and content creation, we're going to cover off it, hopefully in quite a lot of detail. I'm going to ask Pauline about her skills as interviewing and hosting, another key part of podcasting. We're going to go into probably light touch on the technical dynamics of podcasting, although we'll see how much ground we can cover. And then maybe just get some of Pauline's experience across her career. So as a loose format, that's what we're going to try and follow. With that, Pauline, we've got a couple of slides to show, but not many, don't worry about it. And Pauline, with that, I wonder if I can pass across to you to give an introduction to yourself, your experience podcasting, and your journey so far would be really useful.
Okay, thanks very much, Alex. Hello, everybody. I'm talking to you from an echoey office in very sunny Glasgow. I'm not, if you can tell, I'm not Scottish. I'm from Northern Ireland, from Derry, actually, which we'll feature in a wee minute. So I started off, my background is radio. Right from there, I was about 15, 16, I was involved in hospital radio, then moved on to student radio and did wee bits on Radio Ulster, and was a volunteer producer and reporter for events radio, sort of like the Edinburgh Festival. I did that sort of when I came out of college, trained to be a radio journalist. And then I was in Radio Foyle as a news reporter. That's in Northern Ireland and up around what is the northwest, Derry. And I was there for most of the 90s. So covering a lot of things that were happening at that time, like the Good Friday Agreement and the ceasefires and everything in Northern Ireland. Then I came to Scotland in 99, into the newsroom there, worked on Good Morning Scotland and a news review programme which went out on a Saturday morning called Newsweek. And I also was a senior producer on a phone-in programme. And then I did make documentaries, quite a few documentaries, and what we would call, like features that you would hear where, it was out and about and you'd hear people's voices and there's somebody telling the story woven through it. And that sort of died away a bit because then we wanted to do everything live. So come the era of podcasts, and those sort of skills came back into vogue again of going out and talking to people and editing it and putting it together. So before lockdown, I suppose maybe from, I'm trying to think, 2016, 2017, I was involved in the BBC. I was freelance at this stage and involved in sort of true crime podcasts. Tended to join them as when they'd started, and then got involved in producing those, or involved in the production team. And then I made another podcast during lockdown called the Tartan Noir Show, which featured Scottish crime writers. That was great fun, but it was all done from my living room and different people in their living rooms. And that began then the idea that you could record remotely, and you didn't have to be with somebody physically to do this, or even using studios. You could use Zoom, or there's other sort of tricks that you can do as well. So that led on to other podcasts, Talking Derry Girls, which was based around the TV series Derry Girls, because I'm from Derry, and two of my pals also from Derry, and we worked all in the radio station together. So while I don't know if any of you watched Derry Girls, the comedy. So when they were all at school, we were all sort of like the adults. We were like their aunts out working and doing things. So we had quite a lot of stories about that. And then I've done a few things. Last year, I was involved in making a podcast throughout the year for the Prince and Princess of Wales Hospice in Glasgow. So that was a year-long project. I can talk a bit about that afterwards. But one of the ones I really enjoyed doing was Unforgotten Highland Women, which had me in my old camper van driving around the Highlands in Ireland, well, Orkney, and doing interviews in front of an audience. But Alex, do you want me to stop there? It's enough in that so far.
Great, it's beautiful. Thank you, Pauline. And we're going to come back to some of the things you touched on there, hopefully in a bit more detail. But I guess given the nature of the content that we're trying to cover, I guess a place to start might be, if a business network organization is podcast curious, what's your tips? How do they establish whether a podcast is right for them? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think first initial bit of advice would be to sit down with yourself and ask yourself, why would you ever want to do this? Why are you wanting to do a podcast? I don't know if there's anybody, you might want to put it in the chat. Has anybody dipped their toe into the podcast world? Are you all newbies at this, or are you already making podcasts, or seriously down the line of thinking about doing it? I mean, for a business or a creative organization, it's a great communication tool. There's an awful lot of podcasts out there, though. There's there's a statistic out yesterday. They're very big in Australia. You would think that America would maybe top, the listening, but in Australia, there was I read online yesterday, there's 2 million Australians listen to podcasts daily, and they're more inclined, Australians, to try out new ones. So there's a bit of a history of podcasting there, but I mean, these are a lot in the entertainment or the true crime, or but what you're maybe thinking of is using it as a tool as part of your business to maybe promote what you're doing, or to share some stories, or to get your message out there. So that's what I see in the chat here. Maybe have a wee look just to see. New to it, just started in Orkney. Oh, right, I'm totally new to this. Okay, right. So it looks as like most of you are quite new to podcasting, and I started off a bit flippantly saying why. I mean, you think a lot of people make podcasts, but it really is, first of all, to think, why do I want to do this? What's the purpose of doing this? Is it to tell your story? Is it to sell a product? What is your product? Does it have a story around it? What's your budget for it? Are you going to do it yourself? How many episodes? How are you going to promote it? So those are the kind of questions. So if you start, I don't know, does anybody here make cardboard boxes? No? No? I'm just picking cardboard boxes as an example. Could you make a podcast about cardboard boxes? If you make them, how could you make that into a podcast? This is something Alex and I were talking before. And I sort of thought that's quite a good example, because you could, it's stories. Is there a story? So who are you selling to? What are the people you're selling to? What are they making what do they do with their cardboard boxes? Are they moving house, or is it for going? Is it are they used by charities to send stuff to countries where things are needed? So there's always the potential for a story around that. But also look at your skill set, within your team. Do you have anyone that would be able to take this on? Because right from the start, you say it takes a lot of time. You might think, yeah, I've got an idea for a podcast. You might have an idea for one episode of a podcast, but could you make it last for 6 episodes, 10 episodes? How long are they going to be? Who's your audience is the other big question. So who's your intended audience, and why do you want to do it? I would say are the two main things to ask yourself before you even start. And how are you going to let people know it's there? It involves a lot of social media. But there are plus sides. If you do make a podcast, it can be picked up by local press. You can end up, as I've done from making podcasts about different things, being interviewed on the radio. So it can lead to mainstream coverage as well. And that's what you sort of think. So it's really in your marketing plan that you want to think about, how would a podcast fit into a marketing plan? What budget have you for it? And then we'll talk about sort of like, how can you record it? What kind of equipment do you need? And it's not really maybe as expensive or difficult as you think now with technology the way it is to actually go out and record something.
Awesome, thanks so much. And leading on from that, although you did touch on some of it in your answer there, but I guess what advice would you have for how you identify a story or a message that would make a good podcast? What would make it suitable for that format? What's the process for establishing that? So I guess the preliminary stages of identifying what is the story, is a format like a podcast suitable, and then maybe we'll move on to the level of commitment required that you touched on there. But I'm guessing with everybody being at the start of this journey, really maybe slightly new to the idea of podcasting, maybe the kind of planning design phase, what as a kind of first step, how do you identify if your story, if your message is right for a podcast format? How do you establish that? What makes it suitable for that? And is there a process you go through to establish that?
Well, if you're here, you've obviously maybe got an idea or something that's niggling at the back of your mind, thinking there's a story here. I mean, it all comes back to story and authenticity, from experience, something that you've got a very strong interest in, because really the best podcasts are made by people who are slightly obsessed about something, or that's something you give a lot of energy and time to, because it is a conveyor belt. Once you start, you've got to keep going. But that depends on what style of podcast you're wanting to make, or how long you want it to be. I mean, we'll get into that. There's no rules. There's nothing to say how long it has to be or how many episodes you have to have. But you then have to sort of think of how you get it out there. Now, the message, what's the message that's something that's very important to you. It might be a case of just looking at your business and looking at maybe doing a bit of analysis on all the things that you have done to get coverage or to reach out to people, be it leaflets, be it ads in your paper, maybe spots in a local radio station. A good way to start maybe as well is being guests in other people's podcasts. That is a good way of just testing it out, see what you sound like, or maybe you've identified somebody within your team that could produce this, because basically you'll need somebody to record it, produce it, so they're there when it's being recorded, edit it, and then look at how you get it out into the world. And then, I mean, it can be there. It's not like a radio station where you switch it on and there's a program. You've got to promote it and get people interested in listening. And then after that, it's usually sort of like a word of mouth, you know, or people say, did you hear this? Did you hear? So you've got to have a compelling heart to it. You know, the most important bit is the voice in this. So I have been approached, you know, to make podcasts. So as an outsider, you know, I'm coming in, and maybe if I talk a wee bit about, well, I'll just mention the hospice one. I mean, I was commissioned to do that. And so I had meetings, and they said, what we want to do is break down the barriers of talking about end of life. So that was okay. So what style did they want? At the beginning, they wanted hour-long documentary styles, like a Radio Foyle documentary. And I said, okay, that's expensive. So it was like, you know, I made it like a program, like a documentary program, but it was too long and it was too much of a commitment for people to listen to. So we changed it to weekly. So it was a much shorter, like 20-minute weekly podcast, more newsy, more, you know, just talking about all aspects of the operation of a hospice, not just end of life, but the fundraising, the people who were volunteers, the people who did challenges. So, you know, I wanted to find out. So I spent quite a bit of time just going around talking to people in all the different areas, the charity shops, events and things. So that was quite, I mean, because people said to me, oh gosh, that must be grim. It wasn't. It was one of the most uplifting podcast series I made. And then the Unforgotten Highland Women. I made that it was the museums and Heritage Highlands, is that it? And XpoNorth.
Yeah.
Did I get the title right, Alex? And they wanted to, it was after the lockdowns, so everybody's getting back to normal, but they wanted to get people back into museums again. And we had this idea. It was actually it was Jessica from XpoNorth approached me, and she said, there's an awful lot of women in museums that don't get enough attention. You know, they're maybe just a photograph or a wee bit, but some of them have done amazing stuff, you know, and it just really exciting stuff, but it just doesn't get talked about. So I said, okay, that was a lot of research into that. Just the different stories. We had maybe 12, 15 stories of different women across the whole geographical area. So we had to do that, sort of look at that geographically, how I could get around in my old camper van. And just coming up here, you'll see that was the Unforgotten Highland Woman, the artwork. We'll talk about that in a minute, because that's also an important thing, is how do you sell yourself with the artwork. And these are some of the women that we talked about. In the middle is, now I'm going to have to look at my notes because my mind goes blank. That's Megan Boyd from Brora. She was a fly fisher. She made these very delicate fly ties, I think they're called. And on the right, we have Beatrice Garvey, who was a doctor. She was a GP on North Ronaldsay in the sort of 30s post-war, but she took the most amazing photographs, and there's a whole archive of the photographs of life on North Ronaldsay that she took. So it was a great story about her. And then the one in the corner here, Isabel Gowdy, this was in Nairn, and she was tried for being a witch in 1600s, and there was notes kept of her confession or her whole court case, and she's well documented. But we had experts. I had a panel of experts talking about her and the importance of her case and that whole period of history. So that's sort of some of the topics. So there's a lot of going back and forth. We talked about budgets and everything else, and getting around different events. And then they came to me and said, as part of the funding that we've got for this, it has to be a live event. So normally I would just be going around with my microphone, as you can see on the table here. But they said, no, there's the funding, we have to have an audience. So I had to do it in front, not just to record it, but also with an audience, which was the first time I'd ever done that. And I just had this one little recorder, which I'll show you. So you moved around, and then I edited it afterwards. But it's amazing what you can do just with a small that was it. That was my equipment for these events. I think I've sent Alex the link, so if any of you wanted to hear any of those stories, or just how it's done, or how you mix in music and things. So that was 22. I did that, and they were quite short. They were maybe I think the longest one was about 18 minutes. As you can see, some of it was done. This was in Orkney, the one on the left. That was Beatrice Garvey, and it was done in somebody's kitchen. And people joined in on Zoom. And then on the right is in Brora, where we did 2 stories, and we had I'd say maybe 50, 60 people in the audience who contributed as well. So I went around them and talked to them. So that just gives you a wee sort of flavour of that, of what it sort of looked like. So I had all these recordings, and then you've got all these recordings, so you have to shape it into a story. So this is where there was a lot of scripting in that. There was a lot of taking the stories, and you couldn't put out the whole, like, recordings were over an hour, so cutting all that down. But then that's I've been producing things like that for a very long time. So if you're just starting out, you wouldn't be doing that. But you might want to, if you want to do something a bit fancy, is just seeing, is there someone that can do the editing for you, or that production. Good place to look maybe are local colleges where people are doing, media training, and need something real to work with, maybe, something that could become a part of a project, which would be a sort of like, and if it depends on your budget. I mean, there's companies do this, just, even up in the Highlands. There's Adventures Audio, who do training as well as making podcasts. So, but then you're talking about bringing in professionals, and that can add to your budget. So, but you can just go out. I mean, the other podcast I make, and it's been going now 4 or 5 years, is Talking Derry Girls, and that's just basically 3 of us talking about a television program. I did bring in clips, and we've had the program ended after 3 series. So there was 19 episodes of the program, but we've had 104 episodes of the podcast, because we could see where it could branch out into other things, and we developed it that way. But it is basically 3 of us talking. So it's not as it's not going out. We do go out, but and record at different events and things, but that's the basis of it. So it's just finding what it is that you feel compelled that has to be told. What's the story that's at the center? I don't know. Can you put up that wee Venn diagram?
No problem. I just wanted to touch quickly,
Pauline,
okay, sorry, on some of the things that you mentioned there. If we're kind of on this idea of creative process, content creation, you touched on a really important thing, I think, is that's kind of how busy the podcast marketplace is. It's so what advice would you have if someone's new to podcasting and trying to compete and be heard in that kind of in that kind of congested marketplace? What advice might you have for how you might find your unique voice, your style in podcasting, before you're releasing or distributing anything? What would your advice be for finding how to present your niche, how to tell your story, how to find that uniqueness of voice?
If I go back to the cardboard boxes,
yeah,
go and find anything that anybody is making about cardboard boxes. Just whatever your field is, go out and search out podcasts that are doing something similar. And that way, I mean, it shouldn't stop you making your own podcast, but you have to find what's unique to you. But my advice would be listen, just go and find from anywhere in the world, because that's the thing about podcasts. They're not just local, they are global. I mean, more than 50% of our downloads for Talking Derry Girls are in America. And I think Unforgotten Highland Women got a big American and Australia, and various anywhere where there's Scottish diaspora, same as Irish diaspora. But whatever your business is, just see what's there. Just go and listen and see how they do it, and think, how can I do it differently? Maybe even talk to them. It's not the podcast community's fairly generous, and very open to sort of maybe talking and sharing ideas. I mean, they'll be doing it for their business, their product, their service. Where you are geographically is maybe different. It could be very local that you want to do it. That would be my top bit of advice. Is first of all, just do a bit of get and talk to people, talk to other people who make podcasts in different areas or something similar, and find out how they approach it. But find the thing that is unique to you. For Talking Derry Girls, we were from Derry. We knew Derry well. We had lots of stories about that, as we discovered when we started talking. And it was connected. It sort of ran parallel to the TV program. But things have grown out of that, because the writer, Lisa McGee of the program, she found our podcast and then contacted us, and then we had her on as a guest. And she just gave like it was episode 13, so it was after the series 2 had finished, and she gave like a masterclass on how to do a comedy screen. She just told lots of stories and about being on set and the script and getting the rhythm and the beat of a script and things. It was really good. We just sort of sat back after we girl fanned. And screeched a bit, but we should go down to telling us. So, you just don't know where it could go. And it's the other thing about a podcast is slow. It's a slow growth. So, I mean, I've made some podcasts for people, and after 2 episodes, they were saying, why are we not getting an audience? And I said, well, give it 6 months, give it 3 months, people find them, they're evergreen. They're not, unless it's a weekly podcast. Like, I'm a bit obsessed with American politics at the minute, so I mean, it's updating every day, so here's a fresh one, and you'll let one go because it's out of date. But if you've got something, or if you're thinking of a podcast for an event that you're having, a conference, anything like that, you can talk to different people and have maybe 3 or 4 episodes and just do it as a small contained product. And that's one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Pauline. And that actually leads quite neatly onto what I was going to bring up next, because I guess the audience today, in the main, I guess, we're talking about podcasting from the perspective of without an infrastructure there, without maybe access to studios and maybe limited kind of access to hardware and potentially no marketing budget, those types of things. So I guess from your perspective, and you touched on it somewhat there, but what advice would you have for kind of establishing the format, the content timeline? How far ahead do you need to think? How prepared do you need to be before anything's released? And what's the kind of level of commitment?
Yeah. Well, as you know, if you run a business or you're involved in providing a service, time is, not always, it's not as plentiful. It's my full-time job as a freelance audio producer to spend a lot of time thinking about these things, developing, working with other people. So you could bring someone in to work with you on that. And sometimes it's quite good to have somebody outside to see things differently, and hear your stories and think of how you could structure and advise you. And I say depending on your budget, there's people that do that. There's production companies that also train people on how to use the equipment. I wouldn't get scared about the equipment too much. I mean, the good thing to do very first of all is think, okay, we're going to make this. Do a pilot, just make one and just start and see what it sounds like. And you can do it on your phone, you can record on your phone. I was teaching some postgrad media students, and they were being sent out with phones, and you can get different apps. I'm trying to think of the one they used. It was just sort of like, there's iRig, I think is one. Yeah, voice recorder, just sort of like that. And you just there's loads of YouTube videos. There's no end of them to show you how to do that. This is what I use. This is a Zoom recorder that would set you back about 250, 300 quid. This costs a bit more, the handle costs more, but that stops mic rattle. But that's a professional sort of recorder thing. A lot of Radio 4 documentaries that you hear that are made outside and things are recorded on these. Then you've got to think about how do you're right, you've got that there, you've got to put it into editing software. Again, there's just so many different, there's free ones, Audacity, I think it is, and Audition, Adobe Audition. I use one that I pay for, called Hindenburg, which is Danish, and it's used a lot for podcasting. I mean, if you're talking then going into high end, but you could find somebody, maybe somebody somebody who's keen to learn if you're starting out, that might work with you as a project for if they're doing a project for media studies or something, could help you out with that, to do a pilot. And a pilot is just really you making all your mistakes and just then dissecting it a bit and seeing what worked, what didn't work. I mean, central to this is also thinking who's going to tell your story, who's going to be, is it somebody in your team, is it yourself? My advice would be have two people, because you can talk to each other, you can talk to each other about it. Or if you're talking yourself, it usually involves writing a script to tell the story, whereas if you're in conversation with somebody, it's a conversation you're recording. And you can do it just with the one thing. You could do it on Zoom. You can record on Zoom different tracks, or there's other bits of software called like Riverside is one. I don't use it. I'm working for Radio 4 at the minute, producing a program, and it's the offices in Glasgow, but we are talking about lots of things across Radio 4. So we record on Zoom quite a bit, but then I have an audio engineer that can tidy it all up and make it sound better, but it's a mixture of phone quality and studio quality. We don't actually use studios that much, and that's sort of gone. Podcasting is now, I mean, it's removed that sort of like you've got to be an expert or you've got to have a studio and the right equipment. Anybody can do a podcast now, but that's the plus side. But then there's also a negative in that a lot of people think they can do a podcast, but you've got to really think about how you chat to people. So my advice, if you're thinking of it and you're nearly there, is just get your phone out and sit down with somebody. And one of the key things, if you have two people, is the chemistry and the dynamics between two people. I mean, do many of you listen to podcasts? Do you listen? No. I listen to, as I say, a lot of American podcasts at the minute, and a lot of them talking about American politics, and it's always two people. See Frances, she loves them. She listens to a lot of podcasts. So listen to how there's a dynamic of people. I mean, I do this podcast, Talking Derry Girls, with two of my best friends, and we've known each other 30 years. So we finish each other's sentences, and that people like that. People like the authenticity of people who really get on, or have something to say, or can bring something else, or can argue a wee bit, or can. So think of that within your teams. It might not be you, it might be a customer or somebody who uses your service, and you think they would make a good. They've got plenty of chat. I've got a wee. I mean, I've got a wee quote for you, but I'll maybe. I was going to bring up some, the Venn diagram just to.
Yeah, perfect.
Unless there's anything else you want to ask me, have I?
No, I think we're great. I'll share the diagram, and you can maybe. That I think is really well put together, and then we'll maybe try and move on to interview hosting skills, I guess, because you were moving into that direction, which should be very useful. Okay.
Okay. So I was just looking at some of the messages there. So this is Siobhan McHugh. Has written this really good book called The Power of Podcasting, Telling Stories Through Sound. And I've got her book. I heard her speak. She lives in Australia. She's Irish. She used to work for RTE, and she's been in Australia a very long time. And she is now, she's a professor. I think she's a professor, but she teaches media communication and focusing a lot on podcasts, all kinds of podcasts. But I'm just borrowing her very good diagram to just show you the elements of what makes a podcast. Right at the center of this is audio voice, and that is the key. That's the thing that carries it, unless you're very into arts and you're doing it just with sound or something. But for what you would want to be doing, that audio voice is key. And then round that you have story, authenticity, intimacy. I mean, podcasts are very intimate. I'll read a wee bit of what she says about this. She says these that she talks about are the pillars of podcasting, and I'll talk a wee bit about the different areas. But she says that what good podcasts share is that they engender a feeling of intimacy and authenticity, connecting us through the lure of story and the power of voice. And she says that the true power of podcasting is an intimate sense of connection that audio can build via the voice audio, especially when that voice speaks right into your ear through headphones and earbuds. So it's different to radio. And she says, she put it, I'll just summarize what she said was basically that I work in both radio and production. And she says the difference between radio and podcasting is that radio, you turn up, it's a job, you turn up and you have to be somewhere at a certain time and you do the job. But podcasting is what you do with shiny eyes and ideas, which I thought was a lovely way of putting it. It's a bit more than that. It's freer. You're not constricted with time. You're a bit more freer with your language and with your ideas and bouncing things around. Radio is quite sort of, structured and has a beginning, middle, end, and certain things have to happen at certain times. And she says as well that, podcasts are inclined to make you think and feel more than maybe just listening to a radio program. A lot of radio programs now are made into podcasts as well, but for what you're doing, and it still applies whether it's top end celebrity podcast or somebody wanting to promote their business. All these things apply. And hearing a story, I've worked in one of the other things I've been doing recently is a project called Open Book, and it's short stories, and reading short stories are allowed, or sharing people reading short stories. I've been doing it with young offenders, and there is a science to this, that when you hear something like a short story, which is a bit like a podcast or something, because it goes right into the heart of a story, that it can change the way you think about something. It can disrupt your thinking patterns, and it's used a lot in prisons, hospitals, people who are refugees, people who are homeless, things, and dementia, people who are at the age of society in different ways, and it can help just gives you something else to focus on. So I think more I've been doing that and making podcasts and looking at this sort of diagram. So you bring to it, if you look at the big circles here, you've got knowledge and entertainment. It has to be entertaining. But for you, a big chunk of this is also knowledge. You're bringing the knowledge of something. But within that, as you'll see in that circle, you've got story, you've got the voice, and you've got the authenticity. So that's a key bit. Knowledge and then entertainment, you still have the same, and that's those three circles, the way they interconnect, that show how that all those elements. And I remember when we made Talking Derry Girls, and then years later I saw this, and I thought, well, I can see all those elements coming in. So the intimacy is just how people hear you, really. It's not talking about intimacy, it's how people experience it. And people can tell if you're authentic, and if your story is authentic, or if you've got an energy about what you're talking about, an excitement about it. It's important, and that brings in the connection between the listener and the host. So it doesn't matter what kind of podcast. You can take that away now if you want. It's all right. those elements are there. I hope that makes sense. But so yes, Alex, you were what was the next thing you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, that's great. And we do actually have a couple of questions, so we'll get to them in a moment. And please, if anyone else does have some, please do put them in the chat. But I guess moving into the idea of interviewing, hosting skills, you touched upon that already. And I think what might be some, if people are new to interviewing people and new to the format of podcasting, what's your advice for preparing for interviews? What do you think makes a successful interview? What advice would you give for how do you prepare to interview someone?
Research. Just get asked. Just what are you going to talk to somebody about? Find out about them. Listen to maybe things they've done before. If you're interviewing somebody who's an expert that you want to get some information from, talk to them before. I've done that loads of times. It's just you call them, say, "Can I have a chat with you? Would you like to be on the podcast? Can we have a chat?" And almost you're not practicing it, but you'll get a better interview out of it if you know what you want out of the interview. And maybe there's 3 or 4 things that you want to have in this episode or this interview. And listen to other people doing it. Just again, listen to other podcasts or interviews, be they on the radio or and be curious. That's, I think, there's a curiosity there to genuinely want to find out what this person has to tell you. And in journalism as well, when I was training to be a journalist, there's the sort of the rules of who, if I can get this right now, who, what, why, where, and when. So it's who, why, where, what, and when. It's the 5 W's. And so what is it you're talking about? Who is it? Who, why, what, where? Maybe it's the who first. Who is it? What is it you want to ask them? Where are you in anywhere specific that matters? Are they in your business? Are they in their own place? Why? Yeah, why are you interviewing them? That might come. Well, you can change the order about and when. When is it that you're talking to them? What period of time? So that's, it is just and it will become it becomes easy with practice, but practice on people, practice on friends and family, and just being comfortable with equipment with headphones on. Always wear headphones. Always wear headphones because you might not be recording or something. So even with this, your earbuds in, and you can download. There are various apps, and I think they're nearly all free. Somebody was saying about how can you do it free? You can do it in Zoom for free. You can, like, this is being recorded, and you can save it as an audio file. And I think you can even on Zoom record different channels. So like I could be recorded on one channel, one track. Alex could be in another, and then anybody else could be in another, and then that makes it easier to edit. But then you're getting into fancy stuff. But a lot of those things to try out are free, and Zoom just opens the doors to anywhere. If you get you need good quality internet. And then if you're getting, I have an audio engineer when I'm doing it for radio who cleans things up, but then you're getting into different plugins and you can go down a complete rabbit hole, but people do it. You can look it up and follow lots of YouTube video. That's where a lot of time's taken in. Yeah, something else there, Alex, about time. Was it about preparing?
It was just, I guess, keeping on the idea of for those of us who are not media trained necessarily. And I know you broke down some of the kind of technical components of that.
Yeah.
That's a professional format of learning. But given, I guess, that one of the things about podcasting is accessibility, is that people can mobilize this, can participate, can contribute podcasts now so easily. I guess you're not a seasoned interviewer, and I know you talked about experience, and we can't discount that as the best way to learn. But do you have any kind of advice for how to keep interviews flowing naturally while maybe covering quite technical points or quite kind of dense points sometimes? And the other question I had is, how do you handle difficult guests and moments where the conversation is maybe more difficult?
I should make a shorter episode. If you have done your research and what you want to do is one of the things is if you're interviewing somebody, and I've been interviewed hard-nosed politicians and things and difficult, but if you know their subject a bit and they can tell, people will open up more if they think you've made an effort to find out about them. And you ask open questions so that they can't answer yes or no. So it could be, a bit like Alex there, how long have you, we're interested to find out how you've been making cardboard boxes for 10 years. How did you start? Where did you get that idea from? So you can lead in and listen is the other thing. You have a list of questions, have maybe points that you want to bring up or you want to cover. But don't be sort of bound by it. If they come out with something really interesting that throws you a bit of a curveball, don't think, oh, that's not one of my questions, and then ask the next question. Just go with that a wee bit and say it and get them to expand on it, get them to tell you a story. Because that's really what you're doing, is you're getting people to not just answer questions, but to tell a story. And a lot of it is listening. It's just, and with the podcast, it's not like, if you're doing a radio interview, you've got 3 minutes, so you've got to squeeze it into that. But with a podcast episode, you could have 20 minutes, you could have 15, you could have 5 minutes, just you'll know yourself if that's what you want from that person. If they're awkward, maybe they're not the person. If they're just being a brat, and just don't put the episode out, don't use it. And don't let it put you off. I mean, some people just get very nervous about doing these things. So you want to put them at ease and you want to know what you're wanting to ask them. Be genuinely interested, of going back to the authenticity again and the knowledge. And also remember, it has to be, you want to keep people listening. You want them to listen to the end. So it's listening to how people tell stories even before you start recording. If you're out somewhere and you listen to somebody in a pub or in a shop telling a story, how do they tell it? They don't always come off with the top line at the beginning. They build up to something, it has a rhythm to it that we all know. Well, most of us, people know how to tell a story. So yeah, practice, I would say. And it is nerve-wracking if you're doing it for the first time. But you do it with the people that you're working with, or the people that are using your service or something, to see. I don't know what your businesses are. That's why I keep using the cardboard box analogy. And the other one, I mean, I have a friend. This is a wee quick example of a friend who her daughter is a designer in Northern Ireland, and she makes these incredible big jumpers that sell all over the world. She's become very successful. But her mother, who's an old school friend of mine, drives round, delivers the wool and picks it up, the finished product. So she drives around Northern Ireland where all these jumpers and cardigans are hand knit. And I kept saying to her, that would make a brilliant podcast. The stories of the knitters, you're going to the same people over a period of time. You could be recording a story with them and then followed up, the next week you're back with them. So how did you resolve that thing with your pet dog? It's just storytelling, and it could build. She hasn't been persuaded yet, but I'm working on her. So I don't know if that's useful.
Great. We'll maybe move. We've got a couple of questions, and we've got about kind of 10 minutes left. If you have some questions, please do either raise your hand or bring you in if you want to do it that way, or alternatively, please do put them in the chat and we'll put them to Pauline. Some of these we could maybe follow up after the call. Actually, maybe we won't have time to cover off lots of the more technical side of it. But Tom and Rhonda are wanting to know, in your experience, Pauline, do you know any free alternatives to Zoom for recording longer episodes, given that on a free account on Zoom, you get a much more limited time? Is there any platforms you use or anything you would recommend?
We use, this is getting a bit complicated, but with Zoom, it's 40 minutes, you get free, stop it, and then start it again. And you get another 40 minutes. And then you can edit it. So, you could just record half an hour and say, or whatever, 40 minutes and say, okay, have this arranged beforehand. If we're going to talk longer than that, because it's always good to give, if you're talking to somebody, an idea of how long it's going to be. And if it's going to be more than 40 minutes in your Zoom, just say, right, we'll end it here and we'll dial you back. I've done that before. What we do for Talking Derry Girls is we connect on Messenger on our phones, which you could do on Zoom, and then record locally. So we all have one of these kind of recorders, and we record our own tracks. So I'm recording me, the other two are recording themselves. But then this is where you get into having the skills to edit. So they send me their good quality tracks and I knit them together. So it sounds like we're all in the same room. But then it's quite a simple idea, but it gets a wee bit complicated, and that's where you might need somebody who knows how to do that and do the editing for you. Editing is something, there's a technical side to it, but there's also a listening side to it. So you could, if you can't do the physical editing, you could do it where you're listening and say, well, I just want to take this bit and this bit and this bit, and lose the bits that don't really work or you fluff up. But podcasts are quite forgiving. You don't always have to take out, you don't have to edit as much as you would if it was a radio program. But there's all sorts of, as I said, editing platforms out there, and try the ones for free first, but you have to learn them. You really have to sort of sit down and study them and learn how to do it, and it will be frustrating. But if you know somebody, or if you know of a college that does media studies, or any students that need something to work on, something real, if it's build it into your marketing, or just, give them something. I think it's fair to, somebody's learning, it might be good practice for them as well.
We also have, I'll share with everyone who's registered for the call, actually, we also have quite a lot of technical resources around podcasting, which I'd be happy to share from previous sessions that we've done, either as part of our conference or more recently. So if that's helpful to everyone, I'll make sure that I share that with everyone on the call. We've got another one. Tom's asking, Tom, you can ask if you want yourself, if you're happy to come on, or if you want me to ask for you.
Come on, Tom, come on.
No, okay, I'll
okay, all right.
Okay, so Tom's wanting to know, perhaps jumping ahead, but would you recommend any specific platforms for launching your podcast? So I guess
yes.
Distribution platform partners. Is there any you'd recommend, or?
There's not really, because I don't. There's lots like BuzzFeed. The one I can think of. There's other ones. I mean, you can put it onto Google, YouTube. I think there's costs involved in that, but because of the podcasts I've tend to make are for a third party, or I tend to put them out over a platform like the Big Light, which is based in Glasgow, and it's a sort of almost like it has a lot of Scottish podcasts or Scottish related podcasts on it. So people go there. It's almost like having a bit of a radio station with all the boxes there with the podcast. But you can put them on directly to Apple. But the thing is, you sort of then get into how you write up notes and things, and then what gets picked up for search engines. That's a whole different ball game. And it's almost worth going to search to see what resources are out there to explain it. Because, I mean, as I say, I focus mainly on content, and then give it to somebody else to say, go and put that up for me, and check that all the wording and all's right to get picked up by search engines. It's a wee bit of a gap but I can't, you think I'm not. The other thing is to remember, and I've done this for people, is I work with an opera singer sometimes, and we were in the States and recorded stuff, but it was more like a radio doc, but she wanted it on her website. So I made the content for her, mixed it, she got her social media people to put it on her website, and it was to sell her show. It was a show that she was doing in America, and I was with her. And so basically it's to showcase, and it was people talking about the show and people who are hosting her. And that is a good way, because the one thing maybe I haven't mentioned is how important social media. That was the one thing, I think, Alex, you were going to ask me if there was something that somebody had warned me about at the beginning.
No.
Bring it up now. Yeah, one of the things you said, if somebody could, what was the one thing you wish you'd known before you started?
Yes.
Aye.
Yeah,
It's
perfect.
mad. It's madness. It's obsessive. It'll get into your head. You'll talk about nothing else. Your family and friends will be sick to death of you talking about your podcast, and you will mine everything. You're got you just mine all this information that you think I could make a good podcast episode. Brings a lot of energy. You'll be awake all night thinking about it and editing it once you learn how to edit. But one thing I wish somebody had told me was the amount of time you have to spend on social media promoting it. If you think of it, you've no way of trails, like if it's a radio program, it's trailed all the time. It's in the Radio Times, it's in the newspapers, you don't have that. So what you want to do is let people know that it's there, it exists, what it's about. And that is also a good way of mainstream media picking up and then getting you on as a guest or interviewing you about your podcast to promote it. So that then starts feeding into, you become part of the whole sort of media package. So yeah, sorry, I hope that answers your question.
It's perfect. Unfortunately we've run out of road. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. For Paula, I've actually sent a reply to your question on music specifically. We could do a whole session on
oh gosh, that's a difficult one. Yeah.
But on that one too, we've actually done quite a lot of work in the past about licensing music, both for the moving image in any format, so synchronization or commissioning bespoke music to sync to the moving image. And we've also done one specifically on using music on any kind of media, which podcast we'd cover. So we've done a few different sessions on that. So if that's of interest to everyone as well, because that will come up, I'm sure, when your podcast journey is about licensing music, and yes, music has to be licensed for you to use and distribute in that way. And it's so I'll make sure that I also include that in the mail out to everybody, specific sessions on music sync and licensing. Yeah, we've run out of time, unfortunately. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you giving up your time and giving us your attention. And huge thank you to Pauline. We really appreciate you coming and doing this. And fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much. Gemma, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you, Pauline. And thank you, our audience, for joining us this afternoon. I really hope you did enjoy today's session and you found it a valuable use of your time. And I think the fact that every one of you has tuned in from the very beginning right to the very end just shows that we could sit here for hours talking about this subject. So I really hope that you found it useful today. Pauline, thank you for joining us today and giving up your time. We really appreciate that as well.
Pleasure.
Please do visit our website, www.XpoNorth.co.uk, where you can look at our events section and sign up to our newsletter to be kept up to date with future events and news. Also on the website, you're going to find our video archive, where you'll find lots of extremely interesting content from previous recordings of workshops. And you'll also find today's recording in maybe a couple of weeks' time. It will be up on our website. So if you want to watch back and replay any of the information today, you'll see it there. The website, it's also where you'll find our inquiry form for specialist sector support. So if you're based in the Highland Council area and you'd like to have a one-to-one chat with one of our specialist advisors, please do fill that form out. We'd love to have a chat with you and see if we can assist in any way. On our social media, you can please find us on Facebook, X, also known as Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. And once again, thanks so much for joining us. And I hope that we see you again very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.